will call the meeting to order at 6 p.m. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GL Chapter 38, Section 18, and the Governor's July 16, 2022 revised order extending remote participation by all members in any meeting of a public body. This meeting, the Select Board and Finance Committee will be conducted both in person and via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and a requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website. For this meeting, members of the public and committee members may attend the meeting in person, for those who wish to do so remotely. For those who are not in person, every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. Pursuant to MGL 7C 30A Section 20F, after notifying the chair of the public body, any person may make a video or audio recording of an open session of a meeting of a public body, may transmit the meeting through any medium. Beginning of the meeting, the chair shall inform other attendees of any such recordings. Any member of the, and this meeting is being recorded by the Berkshire Edge, Berkshire Eagle, by the town of Great Barrington, and may be recorded by other members of the public. Any member of the public wishing to speak at the meeting must receive permission of the chair. The listing of agenda items are those reasonably anticipated by the chair, which may be discussed at the meeting. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by law. So I will start with a roll call vote of both boards. There are some members of the Finance Committee here remotely, so let's start with the Select Board since it's a joint meeting. Garfield Reed here, Eric Gabriel here, Ed Abrams here, Lee Davis and Steve Bannon present. Finance Committee. Yes, Donna
Here.
Melana
Here.
Richard
Here.
and Ann.
Here.
Philip Ornstein is here. And I've done my part. We'll turn it over to the town manager to start the budget overview.
Okay, thank you. Welcome everybody to the fiscal 24 budget kickoff. I just want to say it's really nice to be back in person after what, 2-3 years gap and holding these remotely. I'd like to begin with a high level overview and then we'll jump over into the individual department budgets. And our team of department heads, or some of them at least, are here tonight. Some here at the table and some participating remotely. We'll do our best to answer any questions you have. Feel free to stop us at any point when we start to go through the departmental budgets in just a bit. And I also just wanted to welcome Allie to the team. This is her first budget here, and so welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Okay, so Chris, thank you. If you don't mind just jumping right into the first slide. So this is a slide I presented. Oops. I'll hold up. There we go. Okay. This is a slide I presented before. This is just a look at our priorities while building this budget this year. And some of these are a given, of course, and I won't read you the bullets. Some of them are repeats from prior years, but the two in red ink, I just want to take a minute to pause on. Invest in our most important asset, our staff, and look to the future and invest in our stabilization accounts. So these two lines represent themes that you'll hear repeated again and again as we work through this proposed budget. And by that, I mean increasing salaries to remain competitive. That's something you've heard me mention many times in recent years as well. And investing in our stabilization accounts and creating and funding an OPEB trust this year, which I'm super excited to be able to present to you when the time comes. So we'll talk more about those topics in just a bit. Chris. So this is a very high level, again, overview of our fiscal 24 anticipated revenues. This is what we think will our revenues will look like next year. And as always, these are very, very conservative estimates. And similar to last year, we're proposing to use $4 million in free cash to reduce the levy. So anticipated revenues total $40,323,082. Moving on to expenditures. This year's town operating budget is $14,738,633. That's up 6.1% over last year. And our school assessment is estimated to be up about 5.2% at $19,939,489. And our wastewater budget is coming in at $2,831,982, up by 4.0% this year. And we'll cover some of these other topics on this slide later on in the process, but this balances the budget at, again, $40 million, $323,082.
Quick, the school budget, is that likely to change?
Slightly, but not enough to really affect anything.
Based on.
I know those are all based on estimates.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a pie chart, of course. Here's just a visual for you, breaking out our various expenditure categories, and they're in rainbow colors, of course.
Is that pie chart in our booklet?
It's not, but I will be posting this presentation on our website tomorrow,
Absolutely.
so you'll see it again.
I like that.
And I can share this with you as well.
Okay.
I like to present it before I post
Yeah.
it, just so that it's fresh material tonight, but I can share it with these 2 boards as well. Next slide, Chris. So here's our town operating budgets. This is just some historical data and a look at our town's operating budget over a 5-year period. Again, more of a visual than anything, but you can see here how our operating budget has been growing over the last 5 years. And fiscal 24 appropriations. This slide just breaks down our budget one more step. And in just a few minutes, we'll start to get into the individual budgets that make up these totals all listed here. Move on to the next slide, please. Here's our capital, and again, this slide is again just another visual for you. This is our capital program over a 5-year period as well, and something we'll discuss in more detail tomorrow evening when we really get into details on capital. This is an aggressive year, as you can see, of capital ahead of us at $8,773,500. Here's some highlights. Again, we'll get into more details tomorrow night, but just real quickly, a few highlights to point out. Lots of street, sidewalk, and walking path upgrades, engineering for future projects, improvements to our town buildings, our cemeteries, our parks, some replacement vehicles and equipment in multiple departments, a commitment to fiber advancements in Houstonic, and equipment and improvements to our wastewater treatment plant. This slide, special articles, because there's quite a few more special articles being proposed this year than in prior years. I think there were only 4 last year. So I'm just gonna go through this list really quickly, since some of them are new this year. First one is the community impact funding, not a new proposed special article for this year, but it is up by about $150,000 over last year. That's at the request of the Community Impact Funding Committee. Vocational tuition is the next bullet at $140,000. This assumes 2 students, and this is something that we haven't done in the past, but we're trying to get out ahead of it a little bit this year by budgeting for 2 students, so that if and when students do register for vocational programs, we're not caught off guard. So this would fund not only their tuition, but also transportation. And just a reminder about last year's vocational tuition and transportation line. I think we had to increase it at the last minute because 4 students enrolled, but it turned out that actually only 1 attended. So, all of that additional funding will just roll to free cash. Next one up here is stabilization, and just below that is capital stabilization. And as most of you know, we've been investing about $100,000 a year in both of these accounts. And this year, we're proposing to increase those deposits to $150,000 each. The next line down is something we're going to talk quite a bit about in future meetings, other post-employment benefits, or OPEB. And you'll see here that we're proposing $176,500. And I just want to elaborate briefly on this one. The town has an $820,000 account. It's $820,000 in a pension reserve trust fund that was established in the 1980s. We still have that today, and we're proposing to repurpose that fund and add this additional amount of $176,500 and invest $1 million in our OPEB trust fund this year after that's established. So that's substantial. The next item on the list here is our ambulance subsidy, and this is emergency medical services for Southern Berkshire Ambulance. They're requesting assistance from all member towns, and our portion of that request is $151,294. Next on the list is Housatonic Waterworks relief, and you can see that we've added $150,000 additional $150,000 this year. And I think it's safe to say that everyone in this room at this table can agree that more relief funding will likely be needed this coming summer. So. Next item on the list is cemetery study and maintenance, and this proposes to fund a comprehensive study and general maintenance using funds from the sale of cemetery plots. So this is not asking town taxpayers to fund this. This is using existing funds. And we'll talk again more about that when we get into special articles later. The unemployment trust at $20,000. This is just a request to insert some funds in this account. I think the last time we've added money to this was 2018. Is that correct? So we're looking to put $20,000 in that account just to replenish it this year. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and our next item on the list here, this is just another investment to address a critical need here in our town. And this funding would help the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Committee invest some money in local projects that are great thing. Next item is the website upgrade. This is a recent priority item of the select board. So we added this last minute, but we do have an up-to-date estimate on what that would cost, and that's coming in at $30,600. And then the last one here, legal fees, cannabis HCA renewals. We anticipate renewing all of our host community agreements either at the tail end of this fiscal year or into next fiscal year. And we're not asking taxpayers to fund this. We're actually looking for $15,000 in community impact funding to pay for that expense. So we've reduced, and you'll see this later, we've reduced our normal request of $100,000 in legal fees by this amount of $15,000.
Guess I just have one question, the website upgrade. I don't think there's any other on here that would qualify from the way you're looking at it. I was thinking the legal fees also for the website. Wouldn't that just fit in the regular budget under technology? I just find it so onerous when we do the special articles at the town meeting, that the more you could put in that would be regular.
Rather than have a standalone article.
Standalone, because each one has to be voted separately,
Yeah,
and not to hide it in the budget, just yeah.
we can add that into the IT budget if when we get to the IT budget, which I believe is on tonight, we can talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I also love the legal fees, but the way you're funding it, that wouldn't be appropriate.
Yeah, we need a separate vote on that. Next slide. Okay, so this is just the FY24 budget as presented, and this is a new slide that I inserted this year. And
Only for the young people.
yeah, sorry about that.
last line of eyeglasses.
Everything noted here is already in our budget book. This isn't any new information. You've probably seen this as you flip through the pages over the weekend, but this package is the need to know information kind of neatly in one slide. And in summary, I just wanted to point out that our revenues are strong, our reserves are growing, and we're creating and investing in our OPEB trust, which I mentioned just now, which I believe is a major step forward for the town. And the last slide, I just wanted to take a moment and thank the department heads. This budget, as you can imagine, takes months to build and hundreds of staff hours. And it was a real team effort. So I just wanted to recognize their time and effort this year in developing this. In particular, I wanted to thank Chris Rembold for his work developing and managing our capital, our 5-year capital plan. And also Ally, this is her first budget year with us. Say, nice work on putting this budget together and the budget books. Everything looks amazing. So thank you. And that's all I have.
Okay.
Over to you.
So we'll start with the departmental budgets, which is section 6. And first, is select how many, I think, the typical way we do this is to allow questions from select board or finance committee members on it. And if there are no questions, we just continue to move along. So this would be page 1 of section.
And I'm sorry, see, this for our newer finance committee members. I think the process is that we're going through everything and discussing it. Making requests for information where appropriate. And Steve, correct me if I get it, remember this right, but we go through everything once, and then at the end, we sort of go back throughout, we'll go back to each of the line items and include each.
In less detail, correct?
And less.
Yes, that's correct. So now's the time to ask the questions in detail, then we'll go back and vote out. We can make changes here, or we can make them at the end, but some of these tonight are less controversial, or let's just say are pretty clear, and others, as we go along, may need some further explanation, especially my newer numbers. So we're on page 1, select board and town manager.
Of section 6.
Oh, section 6, correct.
So this, of course, is my budget to present, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
This is Anne. Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Yeah, before are we going to go back at some point and talk about the pages in the budget booklet about local receipts and tax rates? Are we going to talk about those later, or we're going to, when can we ask questions just for clarification about those pages?
I think if you'd like them now, we can, after we go through this. Typically, those are kind of at the end, once we've gone through everything, and if you have questions, but if you want to do it earlier on, that's fine.
Can I just ask one question of clarification? And again, I think it's pretty basic, but on page 9 of the PDF that was sent around, so this would be in, I think section 1, the estimated local receipts. There's no estimate for cannabis impact fees. Is that because we just don't know and we're not making any projection?
We're not allowed to, right? DOL doesn't let us.
But that's not part of our.
Yeah, I think the impact fee, they don't let us estimate those till they're in.
Yeah, I'm lost on what page we're on, but
Yeah, but yeah, she's talking about community impact fee, there's no money there.
Yeah,
Also-
I'm in
but
the
also-
estimated
also
local
the
receipts page. Yeah.
Already lost.
Can I share my screen?
Go right ahead, maybe quicker, since we're all at the level.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is where I am.
Have this problem every year. though.
Yeah,
and can you just
That's right.
so the question is, under fees, cannabis impact fees, the actual for FY22 is in there, but there's nothing for 24.
right, we don't know.
As an estimate.
I think DOL
Okay.
doesn't let us estimate.
Yeah, and we don't normally estimate it.
And I guess fiscal year 24 estimates are far below the fiscal year 22 actuals. Is that just conservative
That's
estimating?
exactly-
That's
Okay,
that's
I
the
just
way
wanted-
yeah, you're correct. That is the way we estimate our budget. That also allows us to have healthy free cash.
I understand. Okay, I just was a little shocked to see the,
And I knew you did understand, but there were people in the audience, so I just want to make sure everyone understands.
Yep.
Okay, so going back to select board and town manager, is there any questions, comments?
Yeah, I'll ask it here, it comes up throughout. The town manager recommended is a little bit higher than the budget requested under almost all personnel lines. Is that because they were submitted before the contracts were negotiated?
For salaries.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when the original budgets were requested or submitted, it was either pre or mid collective bargaining sessions. So we adjusted all salary lines. We're anticipating all employees across all three union and non-represented employees to be increased by 4% this year.
Okay, right, I figured that's why it's higher. No other questions on this one.
And the legal going from 100,000 to 85, is that because we moved 15 to be funded by the community, by the impact fee?
That's correct.
Okay.
Any other questions under select board town manager?
What's longevity pay?
Longevity pay is a benefit we offer to all town employees based on the years of the number of months of service in the town. So the categories are 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and 20 years. And it's a pretty minimal amount of money, and it's dispersed to employees, I believe, in the last payroll of November. So it's kind of like a holiday bonus, or appears to be like a holiday bonus. Right now, the categories are for 5, 10, 15, and 20 years are 200, 300, 500, and 750.
Thanks.
Okay, next would be the
and
Go ahead.
Mark, is this the budget where the new HR person is in, or is that in a different category?
The HR is its own standalone category, but we are covering
Okay.
that tonight.
We will
Okay.
get there. So next is page 2, which is finance committee.
Oh, thanks.
Mark, could you just talk about the big decrease in the reserve fund? I think that's because we had upped it because of our concern for oil and gas prices and electricity prices. Is that correct? And then we also, I think, had upped it because of salary negotiations. Is that correct?
You talking about the reserve specifically, the reserve fund?
Right, the
Or-
reserve is going, the reserve's going down from just over 300,000 to 130,000.
Yeah, so as you recall, last year, we increased the reserve account because we were seeing significant spikes in the cost of utilities, fuels, and to be safe, we added some funding. This year, we're proposing to reduce it slightly because we've increased, and you'll see when we get to the Public Works Department budgets, we've increased all of our utilities across the board to make up for that. So we're not anticipating needing as much this year.
Can I ask a question? So Mark, what is the purpose of the reserve fund and why is it under, you have it in this budget?
So the reserve
spot?
fund belongs to the Finance Committee. And it's basically a fund for unanticipated expenses that come up throughout the year. So
Okay,
for example, if we come up short on any line item and need additional funding, we can come to the Finance Committee, present a request, and the Finance Committee can approve or deny it.
but that would be for operating budget only or for other line
It
items
can be
also?
for any
Any item,
purpose.
okay. So it's, I mean, it's just seems like a very insignificant number, frankly.
It is, but in the past, I think it's always been $100,000.
Okay,
We just
so you're
increased-
basically saying your budget, you guys really manage it very tightly, you are always there. You don't really need to have.
We do, we have the ability to move money from line to line within budget, so we
Yeah.
have some flexibility, but This is really, again, only used for unanticipated expenses.
Okay.
And,
And can I ask one more question? And then how does it work with the free cash? Is that another source of funding that's available to the town or?
it is, but this differs from free cash. Free cash needs to be appropriated at town meeting.
I see, okay.
This is something that is
It's just
appropriated
basically
at town
back in the
meeting,
budget, yeah. I understand,
but gives
yeah.
you the
Yeah, okay.
authority to
Alright.
manage it throughout the year. The contingency
And
fund
my-
here.
That's what I was just about to ask for. Go ahead.
Yeah, I figured I would touch on that. This is something relatively new. I'm gonna say 3 years now. We've been building in a contingency fund. And this really just funds salary adjustments when and if needed. Perhaps an increase in a salary line during a recruitment if that's needed. And it just gives us some flexibility that we didn't have or maybe didn't need pre-COVID. So.
What's the difference between the 17 and the rest of the reserve fund?
The contingency is specifically for salaries,
But is it still,
and it's not, it doesn't, anything that from the reserve fund
Yeah.
legally needs to be unanticipated.
okay,
So
but it's still, is it still governed by the finance committee?
the contingency, we have not managed it that way in the past, no.
Okay,
So if
so
you
what's the
recall,
difference between this and a, you know, just a contingency under the select board or, yeah,
in this could be on
Okay.
the select board. The reason it's in this budget is because if you remember back, I'm gonna say, it must have been my first budget year. Because we were negotiating with all 3 unions at that time, but we hadn't settled those contracts. So we just put a lump sum in contingency in the finance committee budget so that when we did settle those contracts, we could move that 2% or whatever. I know we landed at 2, but we didn't know at that time. And we just moved that lump sum of 2% and spread it out throughout the salary lines.
no, it makes perfect sense, but I have no issue with it, it's just a little peculiar to have it in the finance committee.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think that should be really.
We have no
maybe to the
authority
select
over it.
board, Whatever it's called, yeah.
Would you prefer to see that move to the select board?
Fine.
Okay. So we can do that.
Don't put it in part thing.
Anything else on the finance committee? Town account, page 3.
I have a question on the auditing, costs. You seem to think that it's gonna go, lower.
Actually, this budget request is reduced to the cost of the regular annual auditing services, based on what our contract is with our.
Oh, you already have the
firm.
contract in place for next year, so you know what your cost gonna be.
Yes, it's
So
a.
they
it
are,
was
they
a
are
3-year
not increasing
contract.
their rates at all? Oh,
Yeah, in
okay.
previous years, the town has had the need for additional accounting
Mhm.
services.
So that was the additional cost there, okay.
Correct.
And you're adding, just for the sake of clarity, you want to talk about the position you're adding here?
Sure. The town's requesting the expansion of the part-time position to a full-time position, which will allow the town to process warrants weekly rather than bi-weekly to ensure that our vendors are paid on a timely basis. There are also several areas in our financial software system that need some intensive housekeeping to ensure the data integrity is sound and optimize software performance. The town is also requesting a title change and salary increase in an effort to realize a viable succession plan in its finance area and prepare for the future with a proactive approach rather than a reactive approach.
So do I read this right, that you're projecting 3/4 of the part-time clerk and then evolving into the full-time assistant for the last quarter of the year?
Yeah, so the accounts payable clerk position, we're reducing our request on that line item as the job duties of that part-time position will be incorporated into the assistant accountant position by the end of FY 24. So we anticipate that line item to be eliminated in FY 25.
Okay.
And if I can just add, I mentioned in my overview that investing in staff was was a priority for this year, and this is one of those positions, and you'll see some other new positions being presented that we'll talk about in more detail when we get to those as well. But the goal here, and I'll just speak really briefly on this, is that we're not only trying to build a bench and expand staffing in some of these offbeat, but our community has grown significantly over the last couple of years. And we're trying to build our staff up to be able to meet the needs of the community. So we'll talk much more about that when we get to public safety in particular, but it does apply to other offices as well.
Mark, this is Ann. You mentioned that the population of the town has grown considerably. And actually, I'm glad you mentioned it because I was sort of looking at this and thinking, has the town grown? Do we have data that says the town has grown in population?
We have we have a number of new housing units that have been constructed over the past 3 years in town. We'll talk some more about that as well. Exact population voters, I can't answer that question right now. That's something you have to ask Jen. But looking out, we've created a number of new housing units in the community. We have a number of new housing units planned. The police chief and fire chief will also touch on the demand in calls, the increase in demand in calls that's occurring as a result. So
Okay.
again, we'll talk more about. I guess the last thing I wanted to add is that a number of people moved here during COVID. A number of people moved into their second homes during COVID, and we've created a number of housing units. And I think we are a growing community, and I think this budget proposes to grow our staff again to meet those demands.
And you talk about voters, but many of these people may not be voters.
Right.
That's, I think, right. So there's other data that suggests that there are more people here, even if they're not necessarily registered voters.
Right, and I think the towns, our neighboring communities are also growing, and that is impacting Great Barrington. We are the economic hub of South County, and I think the region as a whole is growing, and that is putting some
So
additional
what would be
pressure on
the
us.
source of the data then? Where could we find out? I mean, that seems like a very important
Yeah,
data point,
we
yeah.
can bring some housing data to the next meeting. We'll be prepared to do that.
But I would just
We
say in
have-
general, it would be helpful to know, what is happening in the community, how is it
Mhm.
growing, whether it's, full-time or second home. I think that would really give you the strategic framework, and I think you are right about making it a priority, but I think you also need to quantify it a little bit.
I think that new
Yeah.
housing numbers alone will be quite shocking when you see them all in one.
Okay,
And anecdotally, the school district is seeing the effect of the housing in Great Barrington. It's
please
positive.
see it as a positive,
Yeah,
okay,
it's positive, but
yeah.
it's, there's someone with a question and I'll make a comment. Amy, just name and address.
Oh, it's probably Amy Pulver.
Amy, just unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I was just getting ready because I was on deck, so to speak.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, my only comment is, and I'm in favor of the budget, there's a number of positions that you've increased. And it's pretty easy somewhat, to increase with the free cash we have. And that my concern, even though I'm in favor of it, is if we don't have the free cash that we have this year in subsequent years, and we still have a responsibility to fund these positions. So I think we should do it, but I think we should have our eyes wide open.
I was gonna say the same thing, I don't need to say it again. I agree.
Well, some of this information, is, I'll be honest with you, this is not really my thing, finances, but new positions means more money, means where it's coming from, people get variances, going to incur this, we already have housing finances, and we're gonna ask more money from people, because it makes it harder for people to do things. So I would also like to maybe sure we're really looking at this, because I'll say, I'm not a rich man, but I think it's gonna be, people are gonna squawk. And it's gonna be loud because it costs money. And there has to be a tremendous reason for it. I think it should be completely transparent and go to the public, and let people know this is gonna cost you money.
New positions are always a hard sell.
Yeah.
They are.
Mark, just to be clear for the people, tax rate you're proposing this year, if all this came through, is 14.80, and what was it for FY 23?
1490 something.
Yeah, gosh, I can't remember what the proposed number was, but it's always, again, very, very conservative. We're anticipating another year of increased values, which will probably impact that significantly.
Right, but the tax rate is not going up tremendously.
No,
With
as a
this
result of new
budget,
positions, no.
no, with it. But so the concern would be for subsequent years, which I understand, but the tax. I won't say this won't cost the taxpayers anything, but it won't cost them anything in their tax bill this year.
Well, one thing that might come up is, the fact that we are an economic hub and we always look at the other towns and what are they getting from us? And, that's always gonna come up like, okay, well, they're using our senior center, they're using our roads, or, and they look at their tax rate. So just to be ready for those questions and, what are we doing about it? And so I'm throwing it out there as an obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we tried the gas tax, so that didn't go anywhere.
Exactly.
We did try the penny a gallon gas tax, and that
Yeah.
went nowhere, so.
We'll be, I think Garfield's point is well taken. I think when there's a lot of pieces to this, there'll be a lot of prioritization type of stuff when we get to the end of the story. But I would say that I think it's, I have a hard time just looking at the tax rate and sort of the net effect on our residents. It's really what their actual bills will be, which is the tax rate times their assessment. And the assessments keep going up, so that eliminates the need to increase the tax rate. So I think when we're just focusing on the tax rate, while it's obviously very important, I think that's just half the story in terms of the impact on our resident taxpayers. And this budget is incredibly well thought out, but it obviously is increasing the tax levy on an aggregate basis. What would be helpful to know, if possible, is the projected increase in the tax levy. Some portion of that is going to be new growth, new homes coming online and becoming taxpayers. And some portion of that is going to be increases to the existing taxpayers. So I don't know if that's possible to break that out, but that would be helpful.
We don't really do it at the end, right? Median, the median home, current rate or current amount.
Right, this budget has values level like we normally present in our budget, just because we don't know the values at this time. They're not certified by DOR, so.
But it does project a pretty significant increase in the tax levy. So whether or not that operates through the rate or through the assessment, that's the math. So, and just to put another, one other point is, actually the second page in tab 6 is a very helpful summary. I just want to make a point that when we look at the general government budget, your actual total increase in government spending is 2.8%. And I'm not saying this is intentional, but it's a bit misleading in that it factors in that dramatic reduction, a large reduction in the finance committee reserve. If we don't have that need to reserve for increased utility costs. So just a little back of the envelope math, if you basically eliminate that effect, then your government budget is going up by just under 12% for the year. But so on the other side, big picture, I do agree with your premise of investing in our staff and resources. Just personally, I think it's critical to get additional support from the accounting office for Alice and I. So that's my personal view. But you've added a couple of staff. throughout the various departments, so it is adding up to a pretty material increase.
Yeah, I think we have 5 new positions being proposed in this budget, and again, we'll cover them
Okay.
as we go through this, but I would like to present some housing data to you at the next meeting, because again, I think it will be quite surprising when you see it in that place. On how many units we've added and what that impact is on our.
So I have another question, which is, I mean, your estimated local receipts are very low, which I don't really understand. Why would the tax on room occupancy go from nearly $1 million to 385 when, everything opened up, we see a lot of activity in town and all that.
So that was
Same
just
for
an
me.
annex, and we've done this traditionally, we've always done this. It increases our free cash and it avoids any. It's conservative, but it avoids any problems. We don't know what the future is gonna hold.
No,
And we didn't know when the pandemic was coming.
no, I understand that, but we know what happened last year and we know where we are this year. I thought that you guys were saying that we cannot count on the marijuana revenue, which I understand because you.
Well, that's a little
Right.
different.
But this is very specific because you must have some sense, or we should have some sense, what is happening in town. I mean, where we see, the increase in traffic and activity. So it would be, I mean, if someone were to tell me this is the number, I would have a hard time believing it.
Well, we're being very conservative and
Yeah.
the alternative is to budget it less conservatively. But then your free cash next year will be much less, and you can do that. I mean, that's,
No, I understand it, but I'm thinking the free cash is quite substantial, which is great. I mean, it's
well,
really.
this year it is, we don't know what it'll be next year.
You're right, yeah, but I mean, what I'm saying is you usually have a trend line. About the tourist, business. I mean, that's fairly easy or should be fairly easy to kind of
I
assess.
think what Steve's saying,
Yeah.
is intentionally, we keep the number low.
No, I understand that, but what I'm
Expect, so
right, but what I'm saying, we are talking about, the issue of, maybe higher tax bills and how will people will deal with that in the very, difficult economic environment which we all operate in. And then we have all this money maybe somewhere here. I just don't know what is the right balance, but I'm just saying, as to me, this revenue in any business, this would be the revenue you would have to estimate every year, base your budget on it, because that's what it is all about, it's economic activity.
But we are, but we're just doing it in a different way by using free cash. All that's gonna happen next year is that there'll be less free cash. And if we do it less conservatively, it's not gonna make a difference in the budget. Go ahead.
One other aspect of this, Elena, is that all the local revenues, there's a significant lag between when they're paid by, say, the hotel guests or the restaurant guests.
Right,
And when it ends up here in town hall for us to use. So there's a significant lag, so the way I look at it is essentially because we're not gonna get it for a while, we're just gonna wait till it shows up and then we figure out how we're gonna spend it. as opposed to-
right, but then you have the lag in the number before that as well, and what I'm just saying, that was during the pandemic and the number was so much higher, that's just how I would look at it.
Well, I think that,
Yeah.
we have, again, we have data on the hotel, and obviously on the hotel taxes, it went up dramatically. It was affected dramatically by the pandemic. We don't know how it's going to, how it's going to play out. I think none of us want to be in the business of projecting it, and I agree it's a bit counterintuitive, and we're not sort of factoring in sort of the current reality in those numbers. But I do agree it makes sense in terms of this budgetary process. That's one thing.
We did look at revenues and we did adjust them, we just adjusted them.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to point out, that for several fiscal years, the same figures have been carried forward as an estimate. And we really looked hard at those numbers and bumped it up about $185,000.
Yeah.
So, which is.
Yeah, I just,
But you wanted,
Yeah, I just-
you bumped up numbers that were already very low, so.
Correct.
Right,
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
But it shortens the gap.
I mean, to some degree, yeah.
Mhm.
It's still, it's still conservative. I think the
the local fees, particularly from meals and rooms, are the most fickle. You know, if we, like some towns count very heavily on these sorts of fees rather than property taxes. Here, it's the emphasis is more on property taxes. So as a government, generally, we were very stable during the pandemic. But these revenues did take quite a hit. So
Oh, yeah,
that's,
sure.
that's another
During the
reason,
pandemic, of
obviously,
course.
we
One would
estimate
expect
them
that, yeah,
low.
yeah.
We'll move on to technology, page 4.
Can I actually pause you before you move on? I just wanted to point out that the budget proposal that is on our website does have links in it so that it's a little bit more user friendly, just in case anybody didn't click around and notice that. I just wanted to let you know because unless you click on it, you don't realize it because there's not lines. The website that we have currently doesn't allow the PDF to be uploaded and show that there's lines there.
Oh.
So it links you to every single page, all the page numbers link you to the pages. So I just wanted to let you know so that it's might be easier for you to look at it electronically than flipping through pages.
Thank you. Okay, and then go ahead and promote.
Yeah. On page 4.
Okay, and you're open, your mic is open on our end.
Here we go. Hi, everybody. Pardon me. Excuse me. So technology for fiscal 24. I am one of those departments proposing a new employee. I'm hoping to, the technology department needs an IT director. In the past, I've pretty much worked as like a project coordinator and just an extra set of hands for department heads, depending on what it was they wanted to do. But we're really moving on beyond that, and each department has really specific needs, and each department really needs to work with others. So it's something that would be very beneficial for employees. 50% of the increase in the budget proposed is due to that position. The other thing we're seeing, typically I see, I think that the industry standard I've seen has been 7%. So this year I'm seeing here and there 10%, sometimes 8%. Let's see, the contracted services line, the IT director line, the IT stipend, they were all prorated to have an IT director start, not for a full year, but for half a year. Taking into account the time it takes to recruit and get people up and running. And then the other increase we have, we've had an increase in requests for more mobile devices. So that's where the telephone line item has gone up. I think that's going to support 4 new phones. So does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, Amy, typically when in technology, when you see a new position, you'll see some cost savings either in contracted services or somewhere. And the town meeting vote for contracted services was 31,000 and it's 31,000. I see you recommended 20, but who's doing all the work? I'm wondering why we can't do either a part-time position or just a higher stipend. We have so many new positions. I'm just a little concerned about this one.
Yeah, it's something I think, that's definitely something we could put on the table, a part-time person. We have an outside IT person right now who handles the majority of security issues. Internal projects and such, emergencies are usually handled by me. And if it's something I can't handle, then I pass on to the outside person. But yeah, I think we could, having a part-time person start is definitely an option.
And where's the savings from? I know this is a half-year position, I see, because we're starting at, I assume, January. But I'm looking for, we don't need a contracted person if we're going to have a full-time IT person. So where's that savings?
No, but I'd really like to have some overlap, just because John, our outside IT person, has done it for so many years. So I think that's why we had the full amount, plus, I mean, that's contracted, so we can negotiate that as well.
So if I can just provide some clarification
Yeah.
here, because part of what's confusing is my role in this here. The original request was a full-time IT director, and the request included eliminating the contracted services and stipend for the IT coordinator, so those two lines. However, when we delayed the IT director position in this budget by 6 months, we wanted to build in some overlap and some training to make sure that it was a seamless transition. So that's why you'll see that the actual budget request, particularly for contracted services, is higher than what was requested. We were trying to move some numbers around to make sure that even though the position was only funded for half the year, that we had overlap in training, so that John, our current contractor, could train the IT director on the ins and outs of our server, and Amy could do the same for our workstations and other software products.
And can I ask you something? So you are really saying you want to bring it in-house. You are outsourcing it right now. You want to bring it in-house. Do you feel it's gonna be, I mean, there are definitely big benefits with that. I agree with that. Would it also give you some kind of financial savings? Because usually we are contracting that kind of work outside, because at the end it costs you more than having a person in-house. But I don't know who this person is. I don't know what kind of work he does for you.
His contract is included in this $31,000 line, so it wouldn't be a savings, but it would be, we would have an offset. Meaning the new hire, we're not gonna be saving money by hiring somebody, but we.
So what you're saying, if you are gonna bring it in-house, you're not gonna save any money versus having an outside.
I think in the long run, in-house,
Sure.
we're going to save money by, using our software more efficiently. If we have somebody in-house who, this is not my background. If we have somebody, this is their background, they may be able to find a more efficient software that covers one or two, departments, or it can figure out a way to have different softwares talk to each other. So I think the efficiency that this person can bring to the table is really what's going to help the IT department save some money.
But I really meant the cost here, not the efficiencies. It usually costs you less having an in-house person than if you are contracting, especially in the IT. So,
Exactly. And I think you would probably see that in the following year's budget.
So, but here, what we are saying, we are spending only 30,000, and we are gonna, instead of that, be spending 70,000. So we are not actually saving money.
But in this year's, what they're saying is that they're gonna have an overlap this year in the FY25.
No, I know. No, but what I'm saying is the annual cost, the full salary is about 75, then they put it for half a year, right?
Right,
But we are right now spending 30,000 on an outside contractor.
correct.
Plus the stipend for the IT.
So for the stipend is very little.
Right.
So you are not gonna really save. So you are really betting on having better service, better efficiency.
Right, dollar for dollar.
You are not gonna,
saving.
it's gonna cost you more, yeah.
Yes, I just also want,
Eric, go ahead.
So I guess just want to make clear, a lot of times if you're an IT specialist, and I don't know if it's all in this budget or not, but if equipment goes down or we need more equipment in an outbuilding of the towns, this IT guy would sort that out, right? As opposed to hiring the town electrician anywhere else. So you would eliminate those fees, which I don't know if that would be in this budget or in this particular line item or in public works or where that would go, but that would eliminate outside fees that way as well, because it's the contracted guy does not install new wiring or equipment, right? He just keeps everything running the way it is.
Right.
So.
We have right now we have in-house dispatch and our police department. We don't have an IT person in-house that can manage that. We've been able to utilize a patrol officer that has a great deal of experience in the IT world, but he's actually leaving us this year as well, so for a position in another community, so I think this goes back to the theme I was mentioning earlier, you know, we're growing as a community, and I'm amazed that we've made it this long without an IT director, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'd be much more optimistic about the possibility of saving money in the longer term in something like this, because I think I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that in many aspects of our town government, where our technology is a little behind where it should be, as we sort of get to things like our postage bills and various other departments, I think that those come to mind. But the magic question to me is, do you actually believe, and I'm sure you do, but you really believe you could hire someone for $75,000 to fit this role?
Yeah.
Amy, do you want to address that? I know you did some research on this before.
I'm putting you on the spot, obviously, I asked you to the future, but it's impossible, but probably it's always, anecdotally, it's a very tough spot to fill, right?
I'm sure it is. So I spent some time on Indeed digging through for, you know, introductory positions, trying to find, you know, entry level with good benefits that, you know, so a decent benchmark at least. But by all means, what would you suggest?
Well, I would also just mention, going back to our conversation about the finance committee budget, that we have the contingency fund. If we found that we needed to add another $5,000 or something along those lines to attract the candidate, that's why we are asking for that contingency fund. Just gives us a little flexibility.
For a position, I agree, I concur.
I'm confident in saying I have no clue, I'm just saying it's a big challenge to hire someone like that.
Well, one of the ways that you can look, Phil, because I don't know anything about it, is the school district has 3 IT people, so it would be interesting to see, and I don't know off the top of my head what we pay, but it would be interesting to see what their salaries are.
We could reach out to
To
them.
overcomplicate things, I would just be open-minded to, there may be other outsourcing options, different from the ones that you currently have, that may, you know, at the end of the day, become a more interesting or an effective opportunity.
We're not unhappy whatsoever with the services we're receiving. John's fantastic. He's been servicing our servers and our infrastructure here for years. But he's not in-house, and sometimes.
Okay. Rich, you have your hand up, go right ahead, and Ann, you had your hand up, so I'll recognize you next if you want to be.
Are you speaking to me?
Yes.
Yes, I think of all of the positions that have been proposed, this IT position strikes me as the most important going forward, because IT is only going to be more important and never less important as we become more integrated. I think you spoke well, Mark, that you're surprised you've made it this far because your IT services is pretty bare. And I would suggest that this is probably the most important step forward that you're wanting to make. That's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Rich. Ann, did you have anything?
That was exactly what I wanted to say, so.
So I'll have a global remark and realize I'm usually conservative with budgets. I think each of these positions is important. I think proposing them all in 1 year is not something I'm real comfortable with. I think everyone is really important, and I wish we had them, but I'm just really concerned about all of them at once.
And to echo that myself.
Yeah, and just apologies to my colleague, I'm sort of to the side of the screen, so I haven't been seeing your hands up on the board there.
Yeah, you know, I can see them in front of me, and I'll be more attuned to that.
One last question, I guess, is the STR software in the software licenses line item?
Yes, it is.
Any other questions on technology? Going to assessor's office.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
We'll go ahead and promote Ross.
Yeah.
Hostage back down there.
Okay, Ross, you're up. I got you. Ross, you're muted.
We still need that popcorn.
Ross, you're muted, just unmute yourself and you can talk. There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Where would you like to start? I guess I'm prepared to answer any questions that you got on my budget.
Just give us the highlights if you have any, or the lowlights.
Actually, while everybody was talking, I kind of went through some of the contract service numbers, and I think I might even have that number. I think was in there requested at 56,350, and I think I could maybe make that 51,600.
Which line is that you're looking at?
Yeah, Ross.
Yeah, mine's crossing the 42, so.
That's what I was looking at. I was gonna say, I got bad news for Ross.
Ross, which line are you talking about?
For my budget, it's the top contract services line. Looks like it's
It's at 42,000.
Yeah, it's town manager recommended at 42. Your budget request was 52,600.
I
Right.
can't recall. I just wanted to mention, I can't recall exactly why we, or why I reduced that. I spent a lot of time looking at these budgets. But my guess is that it was based on year-end actuals from fiscal 22. Does that sound correct to you, Ross?
yeah.
Who are we contracting?
Who are we contracted?
Yes.
Was that the question? So it's the same people that we've used, for the last, 15, 20 years, Mayflower, RRC, CAI, Randy Mercer, and Mike Quinlivan.
And what do
this
they
is
do
to-
for us, Ross?
What do they do for us?
Yes.
So RRC, has been handling all the personal property. CAI is our mapping system. Randy Mercer, he's the individual that helps us with our Munis uploads. Gets used by several different people within the building. And Mayflower, helps us with our year-end statistical stuff, Department of Revenue, final numbers, and a lot of the growth that we get.
Thank you. Ann, you have a question?
Say again?
No, I thought Ann had said something. No, okay.
What portion of this, Ross, is, well, let me ask it a different way. I mean, a year ago or a year or two ago, right, when you came on, I think we had to basically do a significant upgrade to your primary system, basically incorporating an update, I believe, provided by the state, if I remember correctly. And that was a significant expense. So does this contracted service line now represent more of a kind of a normalized run rate for your outside services based on just, maintaining the current system and as opposed to upgrades that you've had in the past?
Right. This is more normalized. I mean, next year might be different because next year's going to be a recertification year, but this is more what it would normally be like.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ross.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Page 6, collector treasurer. Alicia, yeah,
Hi,
saying
so
Alicia.
I don't know why, oh, there, hold on, there you go, hi, how are you?
Good.
Sorry for the delay. So my budget's pretty level, other than postage, which is for every single department in the town. And I did not get an estimate last year from any department other than my own. So we actually went over already, and I'm having to take that out of lines in my other budget, which is okay at the moment. But so my main increase is postage, and I got an estimate from every department, and it was almost the beginning of last fiscal year when we moved the postage machine, and I actually put on codes for every department. So I will be able to track every department's expenditures this fiscal year for the whole fiscal year, and see if they're going over what they recommended. But my main increases are postage and tax title litigation. Tax title litigation is specific. It's really specific for one property, and it's Stonegate. We are at the point now where we're in land court with Stonegate, and that's going to cost us quite a bit of money. We have paid someone to do a deed search, and he did a great job, and he was really thorough. But now that it's with land court also has to do check his work basically. And so they're requiring a $10,000 retainer to do that. And then once that happens, then we can move on to the foreclosure process. So those are my two biggest increases in this budget.
Will we get nearly the money back if we are able to take title on this and sell this building? Will we even break even?
Depends what the board wants to do.
Well, is the building worth selling? First of all, the building, I mean, no one's maintaining the building now because we don't own it.
We don't know.
No, I'm just curious. I mean, this has been a long time coming, and everyone.
It has been a long time, but we haven't spent an enormous amount of money on this. To date, we've spent about $13,000 on this. It's gonna be about another 10,000. The man that needs the retainer from the land court thinks that it will be, he's taking a $10,000 retainer, and he is actually giving us a discounted rate because the person that we contracted with to do the title search did such a good job. So he's giving us a discounted rate because he did such a thorough job. So I don't think that other than the $10,000 retainer, I don't think we're going to go above that for Stonegate, but I do have a few foreclosures in the process right now that might require some attention.
Okay, I would have definitely spent more money, so I'm glad to hear that.
I would think there's a lot of upside in the town in that property. So
If the building is still viable when we finally take control of it.
right, and I'm saying, I don't know.
Which is no one's fault. It's not
Right.
I will tell you that there's a lot of interest in that property.
Yeah.
I do have a lot of interest in that property. So I think once we put it up for auction, once we finally get the foreclosure done and put it up for auction, I think we'll get a good amount for it.
Good to
See,
hear.
we probably have about 900 real estate agents who would probably take a look at it. More shine.
So I just, Alicia,
Yes.
what else do you do under contracted services? Obviously, you got somebody to do the title research. I would imagine that was part of contracted services.
Yeah, so we use our tax title attorney, who has been wonderful. She's out of Holyoke. She's paid out of that line, and she has been working very hard on Stonegate, but we do have about 6 other properties that we're trying to foreclose on right now. So she handles the foreclosures and going to land court and all of that stuff for us, and that I spend that out of contracted services.
Thank you.
About a year ago, I asked Alicia for the full story on Stonegate, and she very graciously, spent a significant chunk of time walking through all the story details. So if you wanted to allocate a few hours of your time and her time, You know, I mean, she will do that for you, but you're doing a great job. It's obviously a complicated.
Yeah, it's very complicated. We can wait until the bridge book comes out.
Financial services? We spent a bit more than budgeted, and I'm not asking again, was that a one-time something?
So financial services. So we,
Actual-
yeah, so we actually, the office was so we pay our deputy collector out of that line, well, not our deputy, we pay him to print our bills and to mail them for us. As it saves our office like a huge amount of time. And so basically, we were pretty behind when I started on demanding excise bills. And so basically he helped me get that all caught up. So I sent everything to him to send our demand bills, send out notices, send out everything. So he got us all caught up in terms of, we hadn't demanded really excise bills in like 2 years. And that was just a bigger project than I could take on at the moment, because at the moment when I was trying to get him to do that, we weren't at a full staff. So we pay our deputy collector, but he also pays our, he prints and mails our bills and stuffs them and everything for us. So it's a huge time savings for my office.
So who's the deputy collector? There's no.
Is that a consultant?
Arthur P. Jones, he's out of East Hampton. So once
Is that under contracted service?
Yeah.
Financials.
I pay him out of financial services, so I kind of inherited this budget from Karen, and I kind of was paying things out of where I saw fit. I did see that she was paying Art out of financial services, so I kind of like continued that. I think in the future we can probably change the name of that line.
He's not a staff person, is the question. right?
No, he's an outside. So every town has a deputy collector specifically for excise bills. So once an excise bill remains unpaid, we send a demand, and then once the demand remains unpaid, I send it to him, and he more aggressively collects excise bills. He marks them at the registry for us. If they remain unpaid, he hand delivers letters to houses saying, hey, if you don't pay this, you're going to be marked at the registry. So he's the next step after an excise bill remains unpaid, but he's also providing printing, stuffing, and mailing services for all of our bills, including real estate.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you, Alicia.
You're welcome.
Page 7, human resources.
Okay, this is a budget that I will cover. And I did want to mention a few things. This was a new position last year. This is a position that's shared with 4 other communities: West Oxford, Sheffield, Monterey, and New Marlboro. Our human resources director works here out of Great Barrington. She's actually our employee, and we bill out to the other towns for their portion of her salary and benefits. And this coming year, this is new information since we printed this book. Sheffield is not utilizing her hours, or not at the level they anticipated anyway, and has offered to free up the 6 hours that they're paying for. So Monterey has expressed an interest in taking on 2 of those hours. And I would certainly be interested in taking on the remaining 4, but it does mean that we would have to change the salary figure because it would increase our portion of her or of the total cost of her position to $44,750. So it's not something you need to give me a response on tonight, but just something to consider as we move through the budget process.
So if we didn't take on the extra 4, what would happen?
What's in here, right, the 32,500?
32,556. Or
It would just say that, and then she would
Correct.
just have less hours. Okay.
This is for 15 hours
Yeah.
of her time. She dedicates 6 hours to Monterey, 6 to Sheffield, 6 to New Marlboro, and 2 to West Stockbridge. in general, you know.
How is it working?
It's been working really well. The only thing that's not working is that we clearly need more for time here in Great Barrington.
We've had a lot of turnover on employees.
Yeah, recruitments, personnel matters, just, you know, moving our HR department or creating our HR department and moving it forward. So, you know, scanning and creating electronic personnel files for every employee. It's a massive amount of work. All the onboarding.
How many staff do you have here altogether? What is your total number?
Full-time
Yeah.
employees,
Or whatever, or equivalent.
I'd say roughly 75. With
75.
part-time employees, we're probably just hovering under 100.
Okay,
Amazing how many years we went without a HR person at all.
right, I
And
mean,
we're
that is.
we're
that's-
paying our town
yeah,
manager
yeah,
to be the HR director
yeah.
and not do their own job.
You would have the whole department for 75 people.
And that's the case with,
Yeah.
with all of our neighboring communities, same situation. We made it for a very long time without an HR director. And I think I remember saying last year when I presented this, I can't imagine a private sector business with
Right, yeah.
100 employees
Yeah,
not having an
totally,
HR
yeah,
director.
yeah.
It doesn't make any
So there'd
sense.
be 3 people there, yeah.
The fact that she's housed here, does that help us financially as opposed to her being housed in one of the other towns? Or-
Financially, no, but it's awfully nice having her in the building when you need her.
So it's just really, that's extra space. I mean, it's not like we're providing extra technology or printing, or she's not spending money and using elsewhere. Like, is this her home base that she prints for the other towns and uses?
This is her home base. She is a Great Barrington employee, but she does from time to time either work remotely or in other town halls. And if you don't mind, I'll just briefly go through how I got to this total. So what I did was I took and this is how we did it last year, and we just adjusted the numbers this year, but we took the salary, the director's salary. This year, we're adding a 4% increase, just like all other town employees. Then we add a health insurance plan, we add her life insurance contribution. We add a fee into the assessment for workers' compensation insurance for her portion of that. We add $1,000 for travel training and $700 for membership and dues. In total, that's $82,871. And then we break that down by percentage in accordance with our intermunicipal agreement with the 4 other communities. So we right now are 43% of her expense. And if we do take on the additional 4 hours, we would become 54%.
I'm sorry, if we take on the additional 4 hours, is that what you just said? We're 54%?
54%.
And we're currently what?
We're currently 43% of her
Oh,
salary. and benefits.
okay, all right, so 4 hours is about 8% or something, yeah, okay.
Any other questions? Town clerk, page 8.
Go ahead and promote Jen. There is a little delay, I'm sorry. I am promoting people, but it takes a minute for them to pop up on the screen.
No worries.
There she is.
You hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I guess I'll just kind of go through the lines, maybe that had changes. So the first one is the election workers. There was a decrease in that from this current fiscal year because we have one less election. One new item that I do have is a stipend for the assistant town clerk to assist in the office for extra hours around town election and town meeting. She currently right now only has 35 hours a week. So when election comes around and town meeting or any election, I have to get her out early other days because of the extra hours that she's worked. So this is basically like a stipend that she would have for the year to be able to help out extra hours during those times of the year. And we don't have to worry about I don't have to worry about getting her out early on other days or other weeks. The next one is the longevity pay. That's just gone up a little bit because I've hit the next level. I've gone from 300 to 500. And then down below is the equipment maintenance and repairs. I just increased that a little bit because every year I seem to go in the negative with that because I go over in my copies for the copying machine. We have a certain amount that we can have for the year, and I always seem to go over. So I did increase that a little bit. And then another.
What about the line before that, Jen? They had new equipment. the new
Oh,
line?
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that one, I put in, it was for the town, it was for clickers at town meeting. But it was decided to take them out. Maybe try them for another year. The company that was going to come in, Meridia, by the time I had contacted them, they said they already had a couple other town meetings on the night of our town meeting. So, you know, and I really felt that, you know, they needed to be there to kind of go over the equipment, you know, to explain how it worked and everything. So we thought we would put that off for another year.
Makes sense.
And then the next line that had a change was elections, and that decreased. And that's obviously because there's one less election. So if there's one less election, there's less coding that has to be done for the machine. So obviously there's a decrease in that. And then the other supplies line, that just went down a little bit, just because we're doing some stuff in-house now, where before we were having some local companies do the work. But now we're doing it in-house to kind of save a little bit of money. So we had a little decrease with that.
Then how many town meetings are you budgeting for here?
How many town meetings am I budgeting for? I don't really have a lot in there that I budget for. I'm sorry, were you talking to me or Mark, Steve?
How for you, it's, there's going to be 2 town meetings this year, more than likely. Just want to make sure we're budgeting for it, so we're not surprised.
Yeah, so the
You also
workers.
pay workers.
Yeah, the workers are all volunteers. Obviously there's Kathy and I. There's not really much of a change in anything, at least on my end. I don't produce the warrants. I do produce the yes and no slips, but you know, that's already in there in my budget anyway, so.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, what about travel and training? Was there that much of it? You need that amount of monies?
Well, it seems like in the last couple of years, it has been a little bit difficult, because every time we've had annual town meeting in June, I haven't been able to go to a conference. This is the 3rd year that I'm hoping this year I actually get to go to that one. And then there's $1,000 in there specifically set for my certification, my clerk's municipal certification, that I go away in July every year. And this year's year 2, and it's a 3-year program. So, you know, I mean, it could be reduced some, but it would mean me cutting back on a conference, that's all.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Page 17, if I'm correct, building inspector.
Conservation, number 9.
It's not on the agenda.
Okay, 17.
Page 17.
Not seeing Ed May in the list.
Do we have any questions where we would want to put this to another meeting, because that's not here apparently?
I didn't have any questions.
I didn't have any.
We're still trying to hire the assistant inspector, right?
Correct.
And that has ramifications for how we implement our SDR rules. Is that fair, Chief?
I would say no, not at the moment. I assigned that task. My original plan was to assign that task to our assistant building inspector, but as you're aware, we don't have our in-house at the moment. We haven't for quite some time. So when Steve Browning, our new health agent, started, I asked him if he'd be interested in taking on that responsibility, and he stepped in and stepped up. So,
Okay,
and he's been doing a fantastic job with that.
okay.
Okay, we'll move along in that, that's fine. Page 20, health department.
Hey, everyone.
Hello, Rebecca.
All right, so I don't have too many changes in my budget. There is an increase in the health inspector line and then in the contracted services line. So in our contracted services, it's our public health nursing contract is included. Payment for a copy machine that we share with DPW. Sharps removal services. We have 2 kiosks. One's located here in the health department, and then the other is located at the Rural Recovery Center. So we pay for, once this kiosk gets full, we pay for a service to come and remove the sharps. It's definitely safest that way. And then also we have our beach testing in our contracted services line. And this is why you see the increase this year, because we test 3 different locations in Great Barrington. We test Lake Mansfield and 2 places along the Green River. They come out once a week. They do all 3 locations at once, and they're going up per sample from $50 to $60 this year. So it'll be $180 per week for 16 weeks about. We usually test from Memorial Day to Labor Day. And then I've budgeted for a little bit of extra because if one sample comes back with hazardous E. coli levels, then we need to retest in order to get that beachfront open. So that's our contracted services line. Does anybody have any questions?
Could you, either you or Mark, talk about the health inspector increase?
Sure. In August, we lost our previous health inspector, so our new one started in October. But this position is really invaluable. The health inspector does just that. They're predominantly doing health inspections for their full 35 hours a week. We have 135 food establishments in Great Barrington, and that's not including the temporary food permits that we issue and the farmers markets, which just add to that workload. But the health inspector is inspecting those food establishments a minimum of twice annually, sometimes 3 times, and then complaint follow-ups. The health inspector also does Title V's, perk tests, housing, lodging establishment inspections, and as of recently with this new health inspector, he's really taken on all of the permitting, which is an enormous amount of work towards the end of the year. So I can go on and on.
If I can just
Yeah, go ahead.
chime in as well, Rebecca. I'm sorry, I just wanted to also remind everyone that last year, and this is the significant portion of the gap here, last year we funded $10,000 of this position to expand the hours using ARPA funding. And you're not seeing that this year, so that's why there's such a significant jump in the salary line.
Thank you, Walter. Anyone else? Page 28, debt service.
So I guess I can just give you a quick rundown of what our projections are for the long-term principal of 1,660,000. That is based on our current debt service payments that are due in FY 24. We're projecting potentially a $13.2 million bond issuance at a conservative estimated interest rate of 4.5%. But due to it being issued we plan on doing it in December of 2023, there would not be a principal. I'm sorry, 2024. There would not be a principal payment due in FY 24. So that pretty much covers the principal. The long-term interest has $269,805 of current debt service payments that are due in FY 24. And along with that projected $13.2 million bond issuance, we are estimating $335,874 roughly for payments in FY 24. We just rounded it by $71, so it would be an even number. Short-term interest and pay downs, we're projecting a $9 million band issuance at 5% estimated interest rate, which results in a payment of $209,931 in interest charges. And again, rounding up $69 to make it an even $210,000. The debt issuance costs, there are no debt issuance costs projected for the bond issuance. As typically in a bond issuance, bond premiums cover the debt issuance costs. For the projected $9 million band issuance, we're estimating about $19,970 in debt issuance costs, and again, rounding of $30 to make it $20,000.
I just want to make sure I heard that number right. The long-term interest rate was 4.5.
Yes, the long-term interest rate 4.5. The short term is 5. Yeah, that's a conservative estimate. There was recently another town of our size, and they did a short-term borrowing at about 3%. So our financial advisors are estimating between 4.5 and 5, but definitely the short term is on the higher end.
And so the short term, what is it, a 3-year note or what are you guys issuing?
So a short term is usually a 6 to 12 month ban. I guess you could look at it as almost like a personal loan as opposed to a mortgage. So the long-term debt is like a mortgage where it's over 20 years.
Right, no,
Whereas the
so
short term.
your tenor is just basically less than
Right,
a
it's
year,
just getting us through the fiscal
Okay.
year. It's more for cash flow
Yeah,
purposes.
right, yeah, okay.
Anyone else?
The more detailed debt schedule on tab 4.
Yeah.
There's what looks to me like a total debt service number on the bottom of that third page, which is 39641. So my question is, how does that 2641, if you got there, how does that relate to 2495? I'm looking back.
Okay, so that's that also includes wastewater, which is enterprise funds. You'll see that when we go over the wastewater departmental budget.
Okay. Anyone else? And the same thing with the, I guess, with all the principal and things, so.
Correct. Yeah, you'll see there on that, you'll see the highlighted in the top portion under general fund, under the principal, the 1,660,000. And again, as I said, we would not have a principal payment if we did a bond in December. And the interest, the highlighted, bolded amount is $269,805.04, along with the projected interest that would be due on that $13.2 million bond of $335 336,000 rounded.
So I have a question, maybe it will be more for Mark, because it's really what's happening here. But you guys would be issuing like every couple of years bond?
Oh, you would
I mean, I'm just
typically do,
looking at
you would
the,
typically should do a bond every year.
because I'm looking just what is here, you know, in
Yeah.
terms of the outstanding.
As the projects are completed,
Mhm.
that's the time to bond, is when the project is completed, so that you don't over bond
Right,
if the project comes in at a lower amount.
so I'm just looking at the schedule that's, you know, what is shown
Mhm.
here, so you are saying the best practice is to do for the municipal
Yeah,
finances to do it every year.
yeah, especially with the interest rate is usually lower on the long term,
Right, right.
so.
Page 29, Harlan. We can make this quick. Any questions on retirement? I know select board, you're gonna be getting tired, because I am.
So basically, that retirement contribution, you're just getting a letter from Sheila at the pension fund telling you what we owe.
Correct.
I'm impressed you know her name.
Probably spent it 2 hours talking to them.
It's not without a name. I was looking at earlier today. Okay, that's fine. All right, what else?
We're gonna start fighting in a minute.
Page 30, insurance.
I'm good, thank you.
You're good on insurance?
Does anyone have any questions on the insurance?
Well, I have my favorite issue. I don't know, I mean, people are tired and maybe it's not the right time for it, but I mean, you want to talk about it now? Go for it. All right. So, as we communicated, Ann and I wrote a letter to Mark and Allison, this is sort of one letter that I was thinking about. What I had requested last year, and I request now, is that we just break out some more detail on that health and life insurance number, that 1,783,000. I did some sort of estimates, and basically there are 3 components to that number. There is the cost of medical insurance for our current employees. There is the cost of medical insurance for our retirees. And then the last is basically a reserve account that's housed in this particular line item. But I guesstimated at about somewhere between $450,000 and $500,000. So what I've been requesting and continue to request is that this is a big chunky line item, and we could have discussed and wrestled over thousands of dollars here and there and everywhere, which is a $1.7 million account where I think we don't have enough visibility into it. So what I'd like to do, what I would request, is that we extract that reserve amount and just relabel it. I'm not saying spend it in a particular way, but just relabel it as a reserve. That could be, my research suggests we could either call it, we could add it to the stabilization reserve, which has implications. Or we could add it to free cash, which we probably don't want to do. Or we could add it to the finance committee reserve. All of which, are separate options. Mark, you talked about the importance of the stabilization reserve. I completely agree with that for a whole host of reasons, really, discussed tonight. Big picture, I think our town finances are in very good shape, but our stabilization reserves are significantly lower than a lot of our other towns. It's a pretty easy comparison that we could do on the state website. So I would we've been adding to the stabilization reserve, but I still think that we should continue to add to it. One easy way to do that is just to relabel that reserve and put it into our stabilization reserve. The primary benefit would be that we all know that it's stable, it's a stabilization reserve. And we could better compare and contrast our level of reserving relative to other towns in the county or other towns in the state.
And what is the purpose of the reserve? What is it for?
Well, I can take a stab at that, but maybe I need to ask Mark.
Yeah.
So we have for many years used this line to basically generate free cash. We did talk to our auditor this week to get some advice from him. He suggested something similar to what Phil just mentioned, which is to relabel it.
Oh, I see, okay.
It is common practice. This is not unusual. It's very common for municipalities to generate free cash. They just may call it something else. They, instead of health insurance, it may be titled something else in their budgets. The stabilization approach makes me a little nervous because what you would do there is if you moved it to stabilization, of course, we need a 2/3 vote out at town meeting. And what we're doing is generating free cash. If it's invested in stabilization, we're gonna come up that much short in free cash.
It changes the intent.
It does, it does.
So Bill won't go along with adding health and life insurance, et cetera. So relabeling it is fine because it doesn't change the intent. Where putting in stabilization would definitely change the intent of what we're doing. What I would be against that for what it's worth, but relabeling it if our
Could we call it, life insurance, current life insurance retirees, life insurance other? And then leave it in there, and I know you don't want to call it life insurance.
It's not life insurance.
No, it's not life
I don't
insurance.
think you can call it life insurance.
yeah, you can, because with the DOR is approved.
That's right.
You can call it reserve, that's not for life insurance,
Yes, this has been all approved by the
Right.
DOR.
Apparently the only place to let us do that, you can't say
Okay.
reserve.
Just leave it there if you can do it.
But that's what we say at town meeting, every year someone asks, and we say, we're very transparent, or,
Yeah.
and I think at times Mark just says it during his presentation. My own feeling is, and I may be in the minority, I may not be, if it's not broken, why are we trying to fix it? It serves its purpose. In years when free cash is really hurting, this is what we have. In years when free cash is flush, it's a different story.
And Steve, I'm a little bit still confused. So what is wrong with putting it into the free cash? Or the stabilization fund?
Well, if you put in the stabilization, then the use of that changes completely. It doesn't go to free cash. It would have to be voted out for a specific use
Oh, I
by
see.
2/3 of the town meeting.
Oh, okay.
So that's why that one is a little different. And we don't budget free cash. So you couldn't budget an expense as free
Right,
cash.
yeah.
We don't budget that. So this is the way the DOR years ago approved.
Okay.
It may seem odd, but it serves a purpose.
If it's approved, it's approved.
Yeah.
That should, yeah. no.
Well, we already have it. Go ahead, Ann.
I think I'm about to ask what you were gonna ask. I mean, we already have the contingency line for salaries. Could there be some contingency line in either the select board or the finance committee budget that has to do with insurance?
Insurance
Because
is
it
here.
is-
I'm just not sure why we're playing around with it when it works. Other than,
I
And
I
it's
guess
approved.
because, right, but it's sort of, we're budgeting a little disingenuously, I don't want to say, beyond that, but, we're sort of saying, this is what we think we're going to need when we know we're not going to need that.
it's called
that
conservative
spec-
budgeting, and that's what the
For
DOR. is.
for that specific purpose. I mean, it sounds like it's a budget line that's intended to sort of put a cushion on free cash.
Correct. And approved by the DOR. We're not hiding that.
That's exactly what it is.
That's exactly what it's for.
Right?
And it's approved.
Exactly
Right.
what it
It
is.
would be great if we could create a fund that says cushion for free
Yeah,
cash. but-
cushion for free cash, right, yeah.
Let me ask you a hypothetical, just a. An informal poll, like, who knows, does anyone on this panel know the amount of that reserve?
It's about a
The amount
$500,000 here.
I just told you that.
Oh, no, yeah, every year someone raises their hand and says, what, at town meeting, it says, why are you budgeting $500,000 more than you spent last year? Every year that question comes up. And I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, the other one, which we talked about, how much that, but that's a few $100,000, it's a similar number, isn't it?
And what?
The last one, the local receipts. That we have to do the same thing.
Yeah. But the interesting part is, we have $800,000 into what now would be OPEB. And no one cares that we've had that for how many years? No one even asks how much interest we've earned on it. And that's just been sitting there, $800,000 doing absolutely nothing.
Well, that to me is a bit of a. Interesting stuff. Mark hasn't walked me through that entirely in all its glory, but it sounds like we didn't really even know that was there.
I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't.
So to me, to me, that's a bit of a, the moral of that story is, let's sort of carefully label everything we have. Maybe it's not perfectly comparable, but, you know, I mean, that could easily have been, you know, opening a drawer and finding an $800,000 bill that was unpaid.
I'm hoping we earned interest on it, but I suspect we may not have. But write that down on your notes.
Yeah.
We can get you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really a question for me. How does that?
Well, but you know, again, we know that there's roughly, and we've known every year that there's roughly a $500,000 cushion. Here, it's been approved by the DOR. It helps us in years when our free cash is waning. And is it odd? Yes. But is it approved? Yes. So why change it?
You know, when you talk about balancing free cash, I guess it's a little hard to understand in our current situation in that we have extremely large free cash balance.
Right.
And some of it's due to the host of the community. Yeah, you know what I'm saying.
Right.
So, and that's sort of in the gray area now, but we have a very large free cash balance and it's much larger than sort of broad state guidelines. So given we have free cash totaling, depending how you calculate it, between 5 or 10 million, depending on how you want to calculate it.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to, certainly in this environment, we don't need the $500,000 equipment against free cash.
But this 500 is not for this year, it's for next year. And next year, we might not have
Yeah,
the $5 million.
well, I agree. To me, I mean, I think we both agree that that money should be there for the rainy day. I completely agree with you there. And a rainy day might be the post cannabis,
So this is the basically annual $500,000 that goes there and just kind of.
Correct.
Keeps it going.
And
And
who decides how to use this?
It goes to free cash and we decide how to use it in the next year's budget. So for instance, this year Mark's proposed $4 million. He doesn't get to decide. The town meeting really gets to decide, but we get to decide what's presented to the town meeting, specifically the finance committee. Makes a recommendation and the select board may or may not agree with it. So it's ultimately, it's finance committee then town meeting.
So if you made this decision last year to pull $500,000 out, let's just say that was the case, we would be using $3.5 million this year to offset.
Right,
the
right,
taxation.
right.
We're just gonna feel it next year.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing is that we don't disclose, I haven't been able to find the number for our current employees' healthcare bill. So I had to estimate what the reserve is, but was sort of, was sort of crudely estimating it.
I'm sure we can come up with that number.
Yeah,
Again,
I can email that to you. Certainly.
Can you do it by tomorrow night? Can you just disclose it at a meeting tomorrow night so everyone knows, or the next week, whatever, Alicia, whatever that's. Okay. then-
Yeah, it'll take me 2 seconds.
I don't want, I think, well, I appreciate that. I'd like to get a little more history on that number, because
What about, I mean, could it be
At least
just,
3 to 5 years, you know.
could that be just as a footnote or a line item in the budget? I mean, you guys have the numbers, so. Just that everyone is happy with, that we all see that number. And Mark, you were saying something that you had a conversation with the auditors about it and.
Yeah.
We didn't finish the.
We did, we just wanted to confirm that of course, you know, it was in fact common practice across the state. He did confirm that. He will also be here presenting the fiscal 21 and fiscal 22 audits to both Finance Committee and Select Board soon. We're gonna be scheduling that. In fact, I have a note on my desk to reach out to the group this week and try to schedule that. And that would be a great opportunity to ask him these questions.
Right,
You know,
yeah.
How common is this? Are there other ways to label it? And he could certainly address that. He did address it, I recall, sitting in this room pre-COVID, where he was at the podium, you know, cautioning us not to just pull the money out of the budget without, you know, carefully budgeting accordingly so that we wouldn't have that dramatic drop in free cash the following year. So
I just have one question. So when it says the actuals through December 31st, 2022, the 660,000 and cap, you know, and change, where did that go? Like, can you say that's went to free cash, or where we're looking at the 666,000, 273?
That's.
That's
that's-
premium, that's-
right.
Oh, that's the actual, okay. Okay, 'cause, yeah. That doesn't include, that doesn't include the.
You know, one of the interesting parts when we talk about doing anything with that this year, other than leaving it the way it is I'm willing to bet someone a dinner that we're not gonna have 10 million in free cash next year. And so for us to reduce it by 500,000 now is probably really poor timing. And I know that's not what you're suggesting, Bill, but to move that to stabilization would in fact do that. And we might not have noticed if we had done it last year, but next year we'll notice. And it's really tough when you know we're gonna use 4 million in free cash this year, and we may not be able to use that next year. That's why the new positions scare me. You know, it's.
Yeah, but this reserve has been in there for, I mean, you're
As long as I can remember, you're right.
So it's sort of, it's almost a permanent reserve.
Correct. Which is inconsequential in years when we have a lot of free cash. This year is extremely important in years when free cash is less, pandemic years, for instance. Not that I'm expecting another, right, but.
I don't doubt at all that what you're saying, that the DLR is okay with this, but I have a hard time thinking that they really do this as best practice. You know, I did try to look at what some of the other towns are doing. And it's hard to discern, but my sense is the towns where I could figure it out, Lennox is not doing this. Pittsfield is doing it to a very small amount, and Williamstown is doing it to a modest amount as well. Those are all just very much smaller amounts than what we're doing.
Is it possible, Mark, to ask the auditor what towns that he?
yeah, he actually mentioned some of the towns when we were meeting with him. I can't recall.
Do we just
He
get?
said the majority of the towns that he works with.
Yeah, well, I would ask him to be a little more specific than that.
Yeah, I suspect that they're buried in budgets like this that wouldn't be obvious to someone that isn't familiar with the budget. But yes, we can get that.
I'll conclude my comments by saying that, you know, I don't want to be, I'm not criticizing what you said, but the whole burning concept is exactly what I always try to get away from, and you know, to me, it's just, this is not the right way to handle this money from a disclosure point of view and also from a governance point of view. And obviously, everyone is operating with the best intentions and nothing's been done wrong. I think there's a better way to handle this. And that's what I'm advocating for.
So let's just ask our accountant to give them.
Yeah, we can do that. And I guess one thing I just want to say is that you know, been working here since 2005, and I don't ever remember a year where this wasn't disclosed publicly in these sessions and at town meeting. I don't think that the town has ever try to hide.
Yeah, I'm not saying that, I just think that it's extremely big, okay, and the average viewer, reader, or resident, I don't, it's hard for them to kind of see this, that's my point, so on that,
And I will just say, Bill, I'm not disagreeing with you, but the average resident who doesn't pay attention to our budget, which is the majority, have a lot of problems, because when we get to town meetings, we have questions that we've talked about 20 times, but I get that. It's people have better things to do than sit here for 2 hours eating Twix and going through the budget.
fair point. Yeah, I think that our rainy day budgeting is most commonly assessed by, in my opinion, by their stabilization reserve. And we are deficient in that grade, in that category.
And I do agree with you, but the trouble with the stabilization is it's two separate subjects to me. I agree with you on stabilization. I don't think it has anything to do with this. I agree that Mark is finally, and Jennifer started this adding to stabilization and actually creating a capital stabilization. But I don't think that issue is the same as this issue. I think that issue is separate in itself, and we'll talk about that and how much we're adding to it this year. And I won't even say it's a problem with stabilization. The difference with stabilization is how you access it.
Oh, yeah, clearly, I go to town meeting.
Yeah, and in 2/3 vote.
But I think I think the law is telling us that's the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Before we move on, I just wanted to mention Ally did some looking into that pension reserve trust. It is in a CD and it is earning interest.
Good to hear.
Yeah, there's 40 years of history there.
I'll sleep later tonight.
It'd be interesting. No, it's, you don't need it now, but it'd be interesting to know sort of the last 10, 20 years that has been sitting there unbeknownst to the town staff.
Well,
What's been going on with it?
I wouldn't say that the town staff was unaware. It was brought to my attention when Lauren Sartori Howgood was serving as our interim finance coordinator. Lauren, as you know, worked here for 25 years and was very well aware that that account was there and existed. It just was never brought to my attention over the past 4 years.
And I don't remember it being
Oh, no, I know, but that's not.
Yeah.
So.
It's what they call a high-class problem.
Okay, citizen speak time, anyone in the audience want to speak? By the way, we had about 28 people total today, including panelists.
And I just, for the two members of the press who are here, other than the press and the people who are staff, there were 3 at most citizens.
Yes, and we appreciate the citizens, but
Thank you for the 3 who came.
yeah, we had to pay the rest to be here. I'm seeing no hands up, so by unanimous, media time, I did not ask for media time, sorry. Seeing none, so by unanimous consent, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.